When I was 4, I started barking like a dog. This wasn't barking to be silly or to try to get a rise out of someone. This was a kind of barking that I couldn't help. And thus began my journey with Tourette syndrome. Tourette's is a neurological disorder that causes me to have involuntary, sudden, and repetitive impulses called tics. My first tic was barking. After I was diagnosed, we went for a quick bite at Burger King. My parents described the stares and the jeers and the hushes. Reflecting back years later, my mom said that the gawking made her angry. Here's how I like to describe a tic. Try keeping your eyes open without closing them for about 5 seconds. Do you feel that tingling, burning sensation? Okay, no, you can blink regularly. That's kind of like a tic. It's kind of like a sneeze. How did it feel to have your body fight something that you couldn't control? My tics cause real skeletal and muscular damage and chronic pain. I twist my shoulders and neck so hard that it hurts. I sniffle, I clench my eyes shut. I have sensory issues and mental health and learning challenges. My Tourette's affects my rabbinic work too. I actually have to come out with my Tourette's for congregants. Otherwise, they think that my tics are a lack of attention. And don't even get me started about studying a daf of Talmud with tics. I'm different. And I bring my Torah to you as a Jew living with a disability in an ableist world to call on all of us to do better. Parshat Tetzaveh provides us a framework for how we can all lead through radical inclusion, through Aaron's entire wardrobe. Aaron's Big Day Kodesh, his sacred clothes, are described as a me'il, or a robe, a ketonet tashbetz, a fringed tunic, a kind of turban called a mitznefet, and an avnet, a sash. And he wore a gorgeous choshen, a rectangular golden plate embellished with 12 colorful gems. And he wore an apron called an ephod, made of gold, blue, and purple and crimson yarns. Ibn Ezra taught that the ephod would have wrapped around Aaron's body. The shoulders of the ephod were adorned with 2 colorful gems, each gem inscribed with 6 names of the 12 tribes of Israel. What would it look like if we metaphorically wore the names of all of our people on our shoulders? V'lekachta et shtei avnei shoham, take 2 gemstones, uvitachta alehem, and engrave on them Shmot b'nei Yisrael, the 12 tribes, or the names of the children of Israel. The root pei tav chet means both engraving and opening. When I lift the engraved names, they in turn lift me up by opening my heart. But the gorgeous layers of another soul cannot be in divine relationship with mine when I don't understand another's experience. Rabbi Lauren Tuckman challenges us, asking, what are the ways that we are unintentionally othering people? For one, microphones. I'm guilty of this. Guilty of saying, can everyone hear me without the mic? I promise you, someone can't hear you. And they're too embarrassed to let you know. I imagine Moshe at the bush, frozen by that same fear, when replying to God, Lo ish davarim anochi, I've never been a man of many words. Ki chaved peh uchaved lashon anochi, I'm heavy of speech and heavy of tongue. But then God gives Moses an accommodation in Aaron. Think about all that's possible with an accommodation. Speaking of accommodations, you had to see the look on my mom's face when we saw Wicked on Broadway, when she heard that first opening number. Let me tell you, Wicked has one of the few theaters in New York that connects to her digital hearing aids, so she could hear everything. And we have that exact same sound system at our home congregation at the Reformed Temple of Rockland, so my mom could hear the clergy perfectly. The accommodation not only helps her to hear, but it helps her to feel like a part of our sacred community. Look behind me at our inaccessible bima. Rashi writes, when you build an ascent to the Mizbeach, to the altar, lo ta'asehu ma'alot ma'alot, do not construct it of steps, ela, but rather, chalak yaheh umshupa, make it smooth and sloping. Friends, even Rashi was an advocate for accessible and inclusive Judaism. Lisa Friedman wonders, as a Jewish community, how many Jews are we failing? She writes, as Reformed Jews, we sometimes look out the windows more often than we illuminate what's going on inside. We look out to people we don't know, and we're rightfully called to action. But we also need to shine the light inward to see the people inside our institutions. I believe that inclusion is just an act of radical love, a lifting up of souls that we can only do once we know our biases. Judge Raquel Montoya Lewis writes that the biggest hurdle is getting people to understand that we all bring biases to our decision-making. She adds that we should recognize that it's not something to be embarrassed about, but something to recognize. For instance, no one is so OCD about editing their papers. I have OCD, and I promise you, it makes me want to run into a little corner. And for the record, the weather is not bipolar, and that political figure you don't like is not mentally ill. We need to do a better job at recognizing our biases. And I have no argument this morning, unless this is an even broader conversation. We need to do better in regard to transgender Jews and Jews of color. Being a cisgender man, cisgender meaning that I know myself to be the same gender I was assigned at birth, and being white, I feel that I have a responsibility to continue learning my biases so that I can properly love everyone. Rafi Doherty writes, in Jewish spaces, a lot of transgender people have to mute that part of themselves because it makes other people uncomfortable. Our classmate, Ariel Ezekiel Zitney, writes on this othering, asserting that transgender inclusion is a verb, and for transgender people like myself, it is a crucial component in our feelings of belonging and safety. Zitney explains that even in some LGBTQ spaces, they end up forgetting about transgender people. I ask, how often do we miss this mark? Affirming and not erasing the identity of trans folks is crucial. Zitney writes, something as simple as asking people to write their pronouns on name tags is a clear message to transgender people that our comfort and safety is being considered and that our identity will be honored. My pronouns are he, him, his. What are yours? Erica Davis writes that every Jew of color will tell you a story of how they have been othered in Jewish spaces. Rabbi Shais Rishon recalls a Hanukkah party where a person really approached him and said, quote, "Are you really Jewish?" Or are you just playing around? But, the rabbi adds, the word the person used was not playing. Davis continues that Jews of color have been assumed to be the help. We have been asked if we're lost. We have been presumed to be converts. We have been denied aliyot. We have faced blatant racism. She describes a racist line of questioning rationalized by white Jews who other Jews of color as an innocent curiosity. Rabbi Sandra Lawson writes that when people ask me these questions, I'm never sure how to respond. Sometimes I expend energy to educate other Jews about the rich diversity that exists in the Jewish community, but this is exhausting. Davis concludes that this all presumes that whiteness is the norm and thus perpetuates white supremacy within the Jewish community. I ask again, how often do we miss this mark? A proverb says, Petach piach le'ilem, open your mouth for the silenced. Some of our voices are louder than others. Think about a Jewish community close to your heart. Imagine the children's library, the artwork on the walls. Would everyone recognize themselves? When was the last time an anti-bias training was held or a sermon given on inclusion? Are the clergy mindful of how long the congregation is standing? How often are bisexual Jews erased? Are the bathrooms gender affirming? Are there any inaccessible programs or spaces? Are there fidgets yet? If we truly lifted everyone on our shoulders, we wouldn't have to ask those questions. I believe that we have 3 sacred charges. Number 1, understand our biases. We're all biased here, and we all need to learn how we can better love everyone. This requires some emotionally taxing work. As Kohelet teaches, ki barov chochma rav ka'as. As wisdom grows, discomfort grows. V'yosif da'at yosif machov. Increasing learning increases heartache. The chokhmah, the wisdom we gain from upending our biases, will help to make our communities even more welcoming, inclusive, and safe for everyone. And when we make mistakes, be kind to yourself and others. Number 2, include everyone around the table. I don't believe that we can truly love if we unintentionally other. We even miss this mark too often at HUC-JIR. I'm increasingly horrified by our classmates' stories, classmates of color who are transgender and who have disabilities, who feel unsafe. I feel that we as an administration and student body need to do better. The Talmud argues, Shekol Yisrael Arevim Zeh V'Zeh, that every Jew is responsible for one another. And that said, it's time for us all to listen and include everyone around the table. And number 3, celebrate everyone for who they are and what they bring. I borrow this from Pam Schuler, who says, we live in a world that doesn't accommodate, let alone celebrate, having a disability. She continues, celebrate what every person brings to your community without getting stuck in what they demand of it. My Tourette's has also been a positive force, for it was Winnie the Pooh who once said, the things that make me different are the things that make me. My Tourette's teaches me to be kind to others and myself and serves as what Brad Cohen calls my constant companion, a constant companion that helps me to be a force of radical inclusion. Parshat Tetzaveh says that Aaron's Big Day Kodesh, his sacred clothing, were designed for kavod and tiferet, for honor and magnificence. My midrashic metaphor aside, I really do wish that we wore items that reminded us of the magnificence of and the sacred duty to honor and include every single person in our midst. My favorite part of Aaron's wardrobe is that beautiful choshen, the breastplate. It is referred to as the choshen mishpat, the breastplate of justice, and it sat right above the heart of Aaron. There is something magnificent in knowing that those 12 stones were different kinds of stones and different colors. Unique stones held in a device of justice, which sits above the heart of the leader of the Jewish community. Petach libi b'toratecha, I open my heart to your Torah, the Amcha, and to your people. Our hearts open when we understand bias, when we welcome every voice around the table, and when we celebrate everyone for who they are and for what they bring to our collective Jewish family. Schuler ends her talks by thanking God for making her different, and I do the same today. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hacham she'asani shoneh. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, wise one, who makes me different. Boker Tov.